Devices. I just wanted to hop on real quick because I've been getting a lot of DMs in the last couple of days from people saying that they feel so overwhelmed because they have to review all the lectures and then they have practice problems and that new content just keeps getting thrown at them and they feel like they don't see the finish line of how they're going to absorb all this content in the next few weeks. And what I wanted to do is I just wanted to remind you that you know more information today than you did last Tuesday. And I know for a fact that you also know more information than you did before starting bar prep. And it's crazy, but it really does start coming together towards the end. Like a tumbleweed, you'll keep collecting new pieces of information every single day. And as you keep collecting that information, you'll see little patterns and things will start coming together. Not just from reading the outlines, but really from doing the practice problems, which is why I cannot stress enough to start doing MBE problems, practice MBEs, and start, at least reviewing practice essays. Because you're really going to start seeing patterns come together and you're going to be putting together what are the most important parts of each subject that you really need to focus on and actually memorize. But I just want you to know you're not alone at all. So many people feel the way you do right now. I certainly felt like that at this point, but if you just keep putting in the reps and keep preparing, it is going to suddenly start coming together in the end, and there is going to be a finish line. And next week, you're going to feel better, and it's going to keep going. And by the time you get to test day, you will be ready. And you just have to know and believe that you will be ready in the end of this. So I'm going to hop on later with my next tip, but I just wanted to make sure I addressed that because it seems to be something that's been coming up frequently in my. The next step is to take care of your travel logistics right now. For some of you, that may mean getting a hotel room. If it's at all within your budget, I highly recommend getting a hotel room. It takes a huge weight of anxiety off to not have to worry about traffic or driving or finding parking that particular day at the bar. For me, I stayed at a hotel that was a few hundred feet away from a testing site, and it was just a huge weight off my shoulders. To be able to wake up that morning and have my breakfast and have a place that was quiet where I could think to myself before heading over to the testing site. I didn't appreciate this at the time, but it was, I think, the most beneficial for lunchtime. We unfortunately got out late one of the days from the morning session because it took them a while to collect the books and check us out. So as a result, we had a very small window to eat lunch. And I was able to fortunately just run over to my hotel room and, I had food in my hotel room that I was able to eat. I had an alone, quiet place to be able to relax. And then when it was time to go back, I just went back to the testing center, which was a couple hundred feet away. There were some people that day, though, that didn't get lunch because there weren't a lot of lunch places around us. And getting to the car was a little bit of a nightmare because of where we were in Anaheim. Look, I understand this is not within everyone's budget. So if that is the case for you, maybe, having a person that's willing to drive you on test day, even removing that layer of stress would be immensely helpful, depending on how far you are from the testing site. More important, if you have someone who's willing to get you lunch and have lunch waiting for you outside the testing center, if you have family close enough, that's immensely helpful. But you have to start planning that kind of stuff now, because if you're going to be asking favors from people, that's something you want to do ahead of time. So I just want you to start thinking about it. And my next tip is to make sure that you check your emails and your state bar websites for what the requirements are to register your laptop for bar exam day. So, for example, you usually have to register the software by a particular date. Some states make you do a mock exam by a particular date. Don't be worried about this. This is usually just a 5-minute test to make sure the software works on your laptop. States will also make you download the test several days before the bar exam. I'm going to show you an example here. So, for example, California makes you download the actual bar exam several days before the actual test. If you do not complete these requirements, they are going to make you handwrite the bar exam. That is not something you want to do, especially when you've already paid for the laptop registration. I want you to look up these dates and I want you to put them on your calendar. I want you to set alarms on your phone. I want you to ask your parents to remind you. So make sure you comply with these requirements. Just make sure that you're not putting yourself at a disadvantage just by not doing the bar exam. Oh, look, it's my son.
Mommy. Mommy.
Uh-huh. Hi. Do you want to talk to mommy's friends?
You can't do this.
My next tip is to pace yourself. Remember, this is a marathon, not a sprint. I know it seems like things are going fast, but there you have a lot of weeks ahead of you. It is super critical that you make sure you keep taking care of yourself and that you don't put yourself in a position of burnout at the end. Those last couple of weeks in particular are incredibly critical for you. It is in those last couple of weeks that everything comes together, that at that point you've already reviewed all the material, you've done a couple of practice questions, and suddenly you start seeing the patterns. Suddenly things are starting to click and you are really getting yourself game day ready, which is why it is so crucial that you do not burn out early. Something that I did is I always gave myself a day of the week where I could relax a little bit. For me, that was usually Sunday. I needed that day off for my mental health. I needed a day where I could go see family. I needed a day where I could just sleep and pet my dog all day. I get it. There's a lot of pressure. You feel like you can't miss a single day. If you're feeling really uncomfortable with this idea, that's fine. Maybe you don't take the entire day off, but at least, work a little bit in the morning, maybe do practice sets. But please don't try to learn brand new content 7 days a week. That is a recipe for burnout, and I don't want you to put yourself in that position. You need to make yourself mentally ready for this test, and that means making sure that you don't burn out towards the end. So if you have been studying all Memorial Day weekend, I want you to take the rest of the day off and just chill out. If there's a family barbecue go to it. Your mind and your body will thank you in 8 weeks. Bar exam tip 14, make sure you understand the test you're taking. What do I mean by this? Right now, you're probably feeling overwhelmed by the amount of information being thrown at you. But what are you learning all this information for? Understanding the destination will allow you to better strategize how to handle the next few weeks. So here's a list of some of the questions I want you to have the answers to in the next few days. 1, what is the test schedule for both days? 2, what am I responsible for during each section of the bar exam? 3, how long do I have during each section of the bar exam? 4, how will I be graded on the bar exam? And 5, what is a passing score for the bar exam? 5 is usually the hardest one to grasp because we're so used to having to be at the top of the curve in law school, but that's not the standard for the bar. The standard for the bar is passing. Just to give you a little bit of perspective, in California, arguably the hardest bar in the country, you need to get about a 62 average on all your essays in order to pass the essay section of the bar exam, the performance test section of the bar exam. And for the MBEs, you need to average roughly 67% on the MBEs. Now, that's combined. If you do really well on the MBEs and are getting like a 75% average on the MBEs, that means you can afford to get even lower than a 62 point average on the essays and the performance tests. Flip it over, if you're a really good essay writer or really good on the performance test and you do particularly well, it takes off some of the pressure that you have for the MBE. Why am I focusing on this? The reason is I know a lot of you are really stressed out right now because you find it really hard to memorize all this information. But I want you to ask yourself, am I memorizing this to get ready to take a law school exam? Is that the standard I'm setting for myself? If so, then you just need to reevaluate how you're looking at the bar exam. Do not let memorization paralysis stop you from doing practice questions and starting to get engaged with the material. That way you're not just training yourself to learn the content, but you're training yourself on how to answer the questions that you're going to have to answer on the bar exam, both in the essays and in the MBE. All right, some of you may think I'm crazy for this one, but my next tip is to do 10 minutes a day of typing lessons or typing tests. The rationale is pretty straightforward. The more you're able to type, the more you're able to put in your essays for the bar exam. The bar exam is really time pressured, so getting in more content may help you get a higher score. It's actually pretty easy to increase your typing speed if you're practicing consistently. So if you're able to increase your words per minute, that could result in more points. I know I'm giving you one more thing to do during your daily study schedule, but honestly, 10 minutes of doing a typing game will be a nice break from drilling down and memorizing content. Mnemonic devices are like using little acronyms to allow you to trigger keywords that you're using. Mnemonic devices work really well when you're trying to learn a series of elements or maybe a series of defenses that are all kind of together. There's so many well-known bar exam related mnemonic devices. One of them that I still remember from contracts, I think my legs, which is all the different types of contracts that trigger the statute of frauds. So I think it's like my legs, marriage, contract longer than a year, land, executor, it's G, goods, S, surety. There you go. And there's just something about it that helps you memorize it. Don't go too crazy though with mnemonic devices because there is such thing as just having too many of them, so it becomes really overwhelming. Hi everyone, my next tip is to do a weekly check-in today and every Friday leading up to the bar exam. What I mean by this is I really want you to start thinking about how your studying is going and thinking critically about how you are absorbing all the subjects. And I just want to be clear, you should have none of these subjects completely down at this point. That is so not the expectation. But just like general comfort with the topics, and maybe you have a couple things from each topic memorized. You're really starting to get some practice questions in. You're starting to notice a couple of patterns. Your practice sets are going up little by little. And I want you to think about this critically because you're now entering a time that I think is the most stressful for bar exam takers, because at this point you've done multiple weeks of reviewing content and you're now about to enter a time where you're going to be doing new content, and a lot of this new content is stuff that you did not do as a 1L. You may have never taken these classes in law school, and it gets really stressful because I remember at this time I was thinking to myself, I don't even have the stuff from the MBEs down and memorized. And I learned that in law school already. How the hell am I going to memorize that information and on top of it learn brand new subjects that I know nothing about and then memorize those rules and get all that practice in on top of this other stuff that I've already been doing, and it all kind of piles on and on and on, and this is a completely normal experience. And I want to remind you that there's light at the end of the tunnel, because in a couple of weeks, you're going to stop learning new content. And it's going to be time for you to just be able to spend entire days for you to work on memorization, entire days for you to work on practice problems. So there's light at the end of the tunnel. But you want to make sure that you're keeping these next couple of weeks really productive. And the best way to do that is to check in with yourself and have an honest evaluation of how your bar studying has been going to date. So I think the first thing that you should do during these weekly check-ins is think to yourself, how's my study routine been going? Have I been feeling motivated? Have I been able to be productive during these? Is there anything I can change to make these more productive? And then the next step is going through the subjects that you've already had to go through and think, okay, which ones do I feel stronger with, and which ones are a little bit weaker? And then know that you're going to spend time on your weaker subjects over the next couple of weeks. You should be reviewing everything, but how much time you allocate to refreshing yourselves on the topics will depend on how comfortable you feel with it. So I'll give you an example. For me, I was definitely the strongest in contracts at this point and the weakest at property. I hated property. I still hate property. And I just needed a lot of extra help with it. So what I would do is I would honestly get a weekly schedule for the next week. I actually had an Excel tracker that like tracked how much I was working on each of the subjects, and then had like a little like schedule that I could build out. And I would work in this Excel tracker every week. And what I would do is I would first time block in the new subjects I was learning for that particular week. And at this point, you kind of know how long that ends up taking. And then after I did that, I would look at the subjects that I've already, have already reviewed. And you want to make sure you dedicate at least a little bit of time to each of those subjects, no matter how much you know it, because you really want to get that space repetition in for, purposes of memorization. So that might mean I'm going to re-review contracts for 2 hours next week, and I will dedicate 2 hours of time to contracts review. And property is awful, so I really just need to spend a ton of time with that, still re-reviewing it. So property is going to get 6 hours. And you kind of find where those chunks of time are on your schedule, because now you already know the new stuff you have to learn. You kind of start fitting in the old stuff and what you have to refresh your memory on. And I think time blocking the week before is super helpful, because it allows you to have realistic expectations about how much stuff you're actually going to be able to do the next week. And it's going to feel scary when you do this for next week, because you're going to feel like, I literally just do not have enough time to memorize all this stuff. But remember, the bar exam is not next Friday. You still have a lot of time. We have all of June and we have most of July. And like I said, you're about to get into that time soon enough where you're not going to have lectures anymore. And all you're going to have time to do is practice in some capacity. And it is going to be easier. You have to just trust that dedicating a little bit of time every single week to all these subjects, that it all kind of comes together at the end. But you do need to be strategic about it and prioritize. And doing these weekly check-ins allows you to reprioritize. Now, don't get me wrong, you don't have to stick 100% to your schedule. It's okay to check in with yourself daily and be like, you know what, I thought I had contracts down, but really it looks like I'm super weak with the UCC stuff because I didn't really review that during 1L. So maybe I'll give myself another hour to focus on UCC review and really feel like I can have that down. And that's okay. But when you do those check-ins, it allows you to be strategic about your bar studying. And you're going in with a plan. And going in with a plan is the best thing that you can do during bar studying. So that feeling that you're feeling right now of being overwhelmed, of having all this new information thrown at you with the expectation of reviewing and excelling in the old content, that's a feeling we all felt. And it's going to get better. I promise it's going to get better. Be proud of yourself for the new information that you learned this week, and be strategic about the information that you learn next week and review next week. I also want to remind you that you really need to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. This is a marathon, not a sprint. I hope everyone has a good weekend. All right, my next tip is to have strategic review of your MBE problem sets. Hopefully by now you're practicing MBE problems every single day. Just to walk you through what I would do with my MBE process is I would do an MBE problem set that was timed. Normally in the bar exam, you get about, I think it's 1 minute and 48 seconds per question. So when I first started my bar exam studying, I kind of calculated out that way. As the weeks went by with my bar exam studying, I would continuously try to cut this number, because I personally had a goal of trying to complete at least 9 MBE problems every 15 minutes. If you follow this 9 problems every 15 minutes formula, what happens is at the end of each section of the MBE on test day, you have 10 extra minutes. That 10 extra minutes of cushion is amazing. If you have to use the restroom, you're able to do that and not worry about it. It also helps prevent you from falling behind, because you're kind of training yourself to be able to answer questions a little more quickly. Now, while I was answering all the questions, I would circle any question that I had any sort of doubt about. So if I wasn't 100% sure that I was picking the right answer, I would circle it to make sure I was prioritizing that in my review. Once I had my review, I would review all the answers, particularly emphasizing any sort of problem that I circled. And then I had a chart that I would use to track my MBE progress. So it would be like column for subject, column for subtopic, so evidence, hearsay, and then it would be a column for why I got the particular question wrong. So sometimes I would get something wrong because I didn't understand the call of the question. There was a problem that I got right, but I had circled it. What I would do is I would kind of write out why I was confused by the question, or why I was concerned between 2 different answers. And then the last column would be something I called like rule synthesis. So what I would do is I would restate the rule in a way that kind of made sense to me. Pretty much anything I didn't know that would have affected my ability to get the answer right, I put in that rule synthesis category. And then that document became part of my memorization priorities. So if I was re-reviewing evidence, what I would do is I would start with that chart, review all those rules, make sure I had those down and had those memorized. Then I would review the essay templates that I started creating as I was going through my practice essay problems. Follow me if you want more information about that. I think that's what I'm gonna do for tomorrow's video. And after that is when I would go and I would skim kind of the rest of the outline. And that was pretty much my framework for doing spaced repetition on weeks when I was just trying to refresh. I did this every week. It was super helpful. Next bar tip, if you are using a laptop for the bar exam, is to make sure that when you're doing practice, that you're practicing typing out the rules. It's one thing to be able to recite a rule out loud. It's a completely separate thing to be able to type out the rule. For example, there are some rules that you'll just say out loud in your head that are really long, and then when you try to type them, you realize, wow, that's going to take forever to type out as a rule. Is there a more efficient way for me to be able to type out this rule? And you kind of take out all the filler words and you make sure the buzzwords are still there. And suddenly a really long 12-word sentence becomes a 5-word sentence. Not only is this going to be faster for you to type on bar exam day, it's also going to be easier for you to memorize just generally because it's just less words to memorize. Also, I don't know if there's any actual science related to this, but I honestly thought that my fingers were starting to develop muscle memory on how to quickly type some of these rules after doing it over and over and over again. Just remember that on bar exam day, it doesn't matter what's up in here. What matters is what's on your page. My next tip is to set up a morning routine and do that morning routine every day leading up to the bar exam. This may sound like it's completely unrelated to the bar, but let me tell you, it has everything to do with the bar. Like I've been saying, the bar exam isn't just about studying and learning the substantive material. It's about preparing yourself mentally to handle this test. You need to do things that decrease your anxiety and help you jumpstart your brain to get into game day shape as soon as possible. Routines are good because one, it's going to decrease your anxiety because by doing kind of the same things to start your day, it's going to decrease your level of anxiety because you're going to feel this level of comfort with the familiarity of your routine. It also helps jumpstart your brain because your brain's like, all right, if I do these couple of steps, that means brain knows that it's time to turn on, it's time to go, it's time to think, and it's time to get the stuff done. The routine doesn't have to be complicated. In fact, it should not be complicated because it needs to be something that we're able to recreate on both days of the bar exam. So what did I do? First, I had a playlist of 3 songs that were motivating, made me happy, and brought up my mood for the day. For me personally, I had 2 songs in English and 1 in Spanish because for me, Spanish was something that decreased my stress. And I would listen to this playlist as I was walking around, moving my body, getting ready for the day. Second, I would have an affirmation that I would say to myself every day. I think I already did a video where I said what my affirmation was, but I said this both mornings of the bar exam. And 3, what I did was I had 1 MBE problem and 1 essay problem. I had it printed out, and what I would do is I would read the essay prompt and I would read the questions just as I had practiced doing so during all my practice exams. But here's the trick. I did not answer the questions. All I did was I read them just to get my brain used to, all right, it's time to read, it's time to turn on because we're gonna have to start working pretty soon. I did this every single morning for probably the last 4 weeks leading up to the bar exam. It was super comforting during my last couple weeks of studying. And for me personally, I think this made a huge difference in decreasing my level of anxiety leading up to the bar exam.